Signore e signori, gentili ospiti, ci sono momenti nella storia recente in cui la tecnologia ha smesso di essere invisibile e si è rivelata per ciò che davvero è, una forza strutturale capace di proteggere vite, orientare decisioni e di salvare sistemi. Il nostro prossimo ospite ci porta dentro una di queste esperienze, quella vissuta al cuore della pandemia globale, quando le infrastrutture digitali sono diventate linee di difesa collettiva. Zac Dannelly, responsabile dell'area Platform Engineering di Palantir Technologies, ci racconta cosa significa integrare, comprendere e governare miliardi di dati per sostenere ospedali, distribuire vaccini, pianificare risorse e salvaguardare la comunità. Ma la sua riflessione va oltre la crisi. Parte da un principio. La sostenibilità sociale non è solo una dimensione etica, è anche una infrastruttura cognitiva che richiede capacità di lettura, trasparenza nei modelli, etica dell'intelligenza artificiale e fiducia nei processi. Quindi se i dati sono il nuovo petrolio, è la fiducia il nuovo ossigeno? Palantir, con le sue esperienze tra Stati Uniti, Europa e Regno Unito, ci mostra come l'uso responsabile della tecnologia possa diventare uno strumento di resilienza sociale e soprattutto di deterrenza immateriale. Quindi, signore e signori, Zac Dannelly.
Thank you all for allowing me to join you. I will be giving the presentation in English, so I'm grateful for the support on the translation front. As was introduced, I am working at Palantir on platform engineering. And what that means is every day I focus on how are we building our systems to achieve our core goal. And that core goal is to connect human systems to digital systems. And the way we do that is through what we would call ontology. So that is the nouns and verbs of the human world being able to be embedded into the code, the algorithms, and the systems of the digital world. In the context of government, this could be a constituent receiving services. In healthcare, this is a patient receiving drugs, treatments. In agriculture, this is seeds being planted. In manufacturing, these are goods being produced. And across all of these systems where we work globally, in every government sector, in every private sector vertical, all of them have a very similar theme, that there is an inextricable human link, a humanity inside of whatever that process is, and it's at the center of driving those outcomes. And to achieve that, and I think that's what we've been speaking about today, it requires a very intentional design of these systems and of leveraging the technologies and the advancements we have now. And I think a very clarifying way to review where we're at currently is to look back on previous advancements. One of the ways I think you can frame these as two key parallel tracks of things we've been advancing in technology. We have our ways to embed knowledge, things like crop rotation, and we have ways to automate systems like the assembly line. One of them is taking human intuition and insights and finding ways to put them into systems, and the other is finding ways to automate and accelerate those systems. Now, what's so interesting as a technologist, having worked in the AI space for a while, is the last 3 years, which I'm sure many would agree with, have felt quite different in the acceleration of AI and of AI's use in these technologies. And one of the ways I think about that is traditional AI systems usually were very deterministic. So these are deep learning algorithms, financial algorithms, computer vision algorithms, where the goal was to take human labels of correct data, this is fraud, that is a bicycle, and have digital systems be able to find those same patterns, deterministically looking across and saying this looks similar or is identical to the human intuition that was put into the system. But naturally, these are quite narrow, and they are very rules-based. And living in the human age, we know that many things are not narrow or rules-based or deterministic. There's context, there's situation, and most importantly, there's humanity. And what's been so interesting in the massive explosion of language models is I think all of us would appreciate even earlier AI systems focused on language, natural language processing, were similar to the other AI systems. They were looking for things. I am identifying nouns, I'm identifying verbs. But the current advancements in language models are precisely trying to imbue that human context and understanding into them. These are places where there's not always a right answer. There are summaries, there are structures, but there isn't a deterministic outcome we are trying to get at. And that is a unique process. The two things that I think I would take away is AI, one, bridges those parallel tracks I was talking about, the embedding human systems and automating them, and specifically language models not only do that, but they do that in a very human-centric way. And whenever I reflect on how that then comes to today, I look back to our work during the COVID-19 pandemic. So whenever the epidemic became a pandemic, governments naturally knew they needed to respond. And we and many technology companies were engaged by the UK government and the US government in a very logical desire to realize the benefits of all the investment we'd put in technology to respond to this crisis. But very quickly we realized it wasn't a technology problem, it was a human problem. These aren't problems of I need to scale up production or I need to scale up beds or respirators. It was the simple fact that there were not enough. They are in different systems. We were responding to something, trying to use technology in a system that needed human context and intuition. And that's really where we found a lot of grounding in what we've been building since 2003 when we were founded. That ability to take the human knowledge and context of doctors and nurses and government officials and find ways to admittedly meet that scale of the pandemic, merging the need for the human context, the humanity, and the understanding with the scale of the problem. And so as we worked through the pandemic, we were able to build these systems that treated each piece of this data for what it was, humans. And to do that, it can't be done in a deterministic way. It had to be done with human engagement, human in the loop, and engaging on the semantics of how do you respond as governments to something that is outside the normal operating procedures. As we continue to scale with the NHS, we're now very honored, and it's an incredible privilege to be the digital system that underpins the NHS's delivery of care to all of the UK populace through systems that aren't meant to be A equals B, but they are meant to embed the humanity of those workers, of the nurses, of the doctors directly into it. And what we've seen and what I've had the very incredible privilege to do is as we do this across these systems, and as I've done previously in these systems, you will always engage the frontline workers and the humans who are at one end of that process. And in traditional AI systems, or really in any traditional technological advancement, there is usually friction at this point of the end workers who are either expected to use the technology or who, quite frankly, have felt potentially replaced by the technology. And the reason for that is in a lot of these past AI systems that are deterministic, it's very common for these workers to feel like a cog. I type in answers and my actions are given to me. I am responding to the machine, I'm not working with the machine. And in some processes where we have these business leaders and government leaders had to make a decision. I might need to trade off the human context and intuition that I know is valuable, but I have to trade it off because I have to meet the demand of the scale, whether it be a problem, whether it be a business outcome. And that dichotomy of trade-off is something that we don't think has to be a trade-off. And as we begin to move into these systems that can embed humanity, can embed human context into the digital domain that can then rapidly advance it, that's where as I now engage with workers and as we engage on the front lines, there's incredible optimism. I think a lot of times it can be easy to say, AI is removing the humanity, which from a technology perspective is absolutely possible. And I would very much recommend that is precisely why we must be so careful and diligent in actually leveraging to do the exact opposite. Where now when we work with nurses, or if you speak to any nurses, whether it be in the US private system or the UK system, almost to a T, they will all tell you, if they had the ability to scale their time alongside patients, if doctors could spend more time with patients talking through outcomes, all of them know that it is not a demand problem. They are all overworked. They know they can't spend the time with each individual human they need to. If you talk to factory workers, they are working so diligently on accomplishing the process set before them, they can't reflect on why are we building it this way? Why are we doing this process? So the optimism I see is individuals who are at the means of production, whether in government or private facility, private sector, knowing that this is a unique time in AI because they can see themselves in it. And they can see themselves in it not just as they are removing their humanity and putting it in the system, but they are actually engaging with the system in very human-like ways through language, through speech, and they can get responses from the systems that are trained and are encoded with the dignity and equity and equality that they then can be able to interact with it in a way where that builds trust. Because in any of these systems, that human at the edge of whatever the final product or the final engagement is, that is the trust. The trust we have in institutions, the trust we have in the healthcare system, the trust we have in the financial and manufacturing domains, that we have that human connection that we are working against. And that really is why, for me, looking back on the technology advancements and where we are today, it is an incredible opportunity for what we have a chance to do. But it is, at the moment, an opportunity. And an opportunity is something we must capitalize on. We can't take it for granted, we can't look past it, and we must engage it not just on the technology side, but on the cultural leader side, on the government leader side, exactly the people in this room. Because the opportunity is one not to have it split between the sectors or between the thought leaders, but actually engaged on collectively. And we sort of have the framework that our goal isn't to use this technology for a 50% increase, it's for a 500x increase of productivity. And we believe that that increase is one, up to the standard of the opportunity we have in truly being in one of the most fascinating technological times that I think you can reflect on, but also in a time where that technology is so inextricably linked to the human. We have this idea at Palantir that everything in our platform should have an advocate. Every piece of data, every action, every model, every logic function, everything should have systems and humans who are advocating not only for its existence, but in a very human way for its best outcomes. And when you think about it that way, in one of the most non-human facing domains, if we take the financial institution, we are having the concept that every single portfolio, every single stock should have an advocate who is saying, I'm the stock to buy, I'm the stock to sell, I'm the portfolio to purchase. And in that case, it makes business sense to embed human context and cognition into these systems. Everything has an advocate with the context of when, where, and why. But much more importantly, in that system, the data and the objects represent amorphous things, portfolios, bonds, stocks. But increasingly, because of how these systems are implemented, more and more, those data points and objects are human. And I feel like that is an obligation we have to realize both the responsibility we have to treat these data points, to treat the objects in our digital systems for exactly what they are. Humans, patients, constituents. And by understanding that, we can have the ability to take the amazing systems that are being developed, appreciate that opportunity, but ensure that the humanity of what we are able to do is at the forefront. What I would say maybe in closing is everything I've sort of described we're implementing in a digital space, but constantly as I engage, the most important research we do is directly with the individuals doing the end activity. As we described in the pandemic and as we've spoken about a lot, it is continually happening that the systems we have are gaining more and more likeness of humanity. We spoke earlier about emotions. We spoke earlier about memories. These concepts that while we can put them into the systems, if we're not putting them into the systems with the intentionality of preserving that humanity, we run the risk of losing this opportunity for what it is. And I believe that opportunity for what we have is to take advantage of a very unique time in technology, a very unique time in global presence, not to divide or make choices, privacy or security, humanity or automation, but actually to say precisely what we can do by scaling human capability is not replace, but actually augment. We sometimes call it the Iron Man suit. You have the Terminator example of the autonomous machine taking actions without it, and you have the Iron Man suit, the tools wrapped around the individual that allow them to do more than they could ever do on their own, but most importantly, allow them to accomplish those objectives that their humanity can drive them towards while leveraging the scale that our current global situation would demand. That combination of the two is what we are incredibly focused on, and I would think everyone in this room, the diversity of experts and opinions is precisely why I believe that this technology domain requires that we are collaborative across it, because its success, both its commercial success, its government success, and its human success, relies on how well these systems can gain the trust of the humans and the humanity that leverages it, embed the humanity, context, and understanding that it should be learning from, and most importantly, be utilized towards the end states that build that more equitable and overall opportunity for what we have at stake, given the needs of humanity and the technology we have to leverage. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. Very excited for what's next.
Thank you very much, Zach. So there is a small gift for you here. So we are very happy to have you here. It was an amazing speech, and we think that companies like Palantir definitely have to be in the loop here because you are playing such an important role globally. So definitely you have to join again at the next edition if you want. Absolutely. Yes. And so this is a small gift for you. So if you want, we can take a picture.